Hey everyone, welcome to a new terrain table feature. This is Salty Simon for Twisted Dice. And what is this big thing you're looking at? I bet you're wondering. It's a big yellowy blob. Well, this is the start of a new table I'm going to be building. For those that might not know or might not listen to the podcast I do with my good buddy Maceface, I host a tournament in the Isle of Man called Warzone Man, and one of the things I really like to do is make really cool, themed, really out there kind of terrain, really. If anyone saw the battle report with the chaos and all of the really, well, I'm being biased, but the really cool Mauler Fiends and Soul Grinders and all that against Aces, Nids, on that really sort of smart looking Imperial Depot terrain. That was one of mine for the event. So I keep building terrain. One day hopefully we're all going to get together and be able to play, hopefully soon. But one of the ideas I had, I've been reading a lot of the Space Wolf books. I've been rereading the Ragnar books, and I just had a really cool idea to go for some really big rocky kind of terrain, as if, you know, it's on Fenris. They're doing the test of Morkai. Whoops, lost that a little bit. Doing the test of Morkai. They've been sent out, and you have a really cool kind of themed board with big kind of mountainous, and I'm not going to lie, Fang-like terrain. And this is where we start. So this is 4 layers. I'll bring it in. This is 4 layers of spray foam. So as you can sort of see, I'll bring my little finger in. So you've got layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, level 4. And what I do is I just build them up over the course of time. If you're going to work with spray foam, it's an amazing substance. It's really, really cool, but it is like napalm. It will, by far, stick to any single thing you go near. So wear gloves. If you're going to do it on, like, this is my hobby table. So if you're going to do it on a hobby table, put some greaseproof paper down. Make sure that this stuff here, when it is setting, does not touch anything, because what it touches, it will stick to, and you will have to, well, if it goes on your hands, you'll remove skin getting rid of it. So don't do that. Also, it's pretty nasty smelling. It's obviously got some chemicals in it. Do it outside or do it in an aerated place. And bear in mind, it is expanding foam. It will get 2 to 3 to 4 times bigger. So, I mean, what are we looking at here? That is the start of what will hopefully be a mountain. And as I sort of bring this over the top, hopefully you'll see, I've done it in sort of, probably better from this end. I've tried to start making it a little bit mountainy. So I've started off quite wide, and I've built up the layers, and I've gotten a little bit finished. We get to the top. It's in a sort of a more classic L, because as much as I like terrain to be really cool, it should also be functional. And sort of what sort of scale is that? It's hard to tell, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my trusty rusty. That is a Warhound Titan. So it is a big piece of terrain. As you can see, good old plasma guns. We don't mess around when we play Chaos. So I'm starting big here, and that is not an AT. It's not an Adeptus Titanicus Warhound. That is the real deal. He is a big guy. So that is, you know, height-wise about that big. So what we're going to do? Oh, they weigh a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to effectively carve this guy into what I hope is mountains, and in a very Blue Peter style. Here's one I've done already. So did my test piece on a similar, in fact exactly the same size as this one. So I'm going to move this one out of the way, and I'm going to bring in where we're at. So this is number 1. In fact, I'll get rid of this. This is Fang number 1. So what we've done is we've carved it, and these are the tools of my trade. A nasty looking saw. Just to kind of, what you really want to do with this is, when you got it, it's quite a tough. You just effectively just cutting some V's in to sort of go and give you the room to then use. I use one of these, which is an extendable blade. I extend it all the way, and it gives you a nice kind of, what you effectively do is just carving it out. They're sharp. They are very, very sharp. So obviously, if you're not an adult, get adult supervision or get someone to do it for you. Bearing in mind that this stuff here as well, wear a mask. This dust, when you're cutting it, is not the nicest. And if you get it on your lungs, you'll know about it. So wear a mask when you're cutting it. But once you get it into that state, what I've done is then I put it onto a board. This is sort of 3mm MDF. The reason being is, one, it makes this terrain, even though it's going to be very tough when I finished it, it does give it a bit of protection in game, and also it makes it functional. You can put a little model you know, you can go into the base, and it gives workings for it, but it also lets me, when I'm going to do the next stage, which is effectively, next stage is going to be covering it in polyfiller for the first kind of coat to make it, well, rocky, and fill in a lot of these air bubbles, because it is expanding foam. It does expand. You have to work with that. Some bits of it are quite tough. Other bits of it, if, you know, you're going to get these holes. It's just going to happen. But the polyfiller is exactly what it's going to do. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically put a pair of gloves on, and I'm just going to sensually massage my my fang with polyfiller. So when you come back to me in the next video, I'll have that sort of first stage done, and then I'll show you what will be the next stage. But that's what we're going to do. We've got a whole table of it. I'll just quickly sort of the sort of bits we've got. Sorry, a bit of garden there, but we've got a lot to work on with a big guy down there too. So that's what we're going to be working on for the next week or 2 weeks. And hopefully when we're all done and dusted, we're going to have a really cool Fenrisian type terrain board, which, as you can already tell, there's quite a decent height in this. It's going to block line of sight. I mean, that's my hand, so you know, we're going to be able to hide tanks in here, no bother at all. It's going to hopefully be really cool, but it's going to look with snow-capped peaks, quite granity looking is what I'm hoping for. We'll work with that as we're going, but that's where we're going to sort of end up. So you can sort of stay with me over the next couple of weeks. If you want to know anything as I'm doing it, I'm more than happy to do little tutorials. I can film myself carving one of these things if somebody wants to see me doing that. You just let me know in the comments. I'll do whatever you guys want me to, but I'm going to crack on and get working on it. And then hopefully in a week or two, we're going to have a really cool bit of board. Be able to sort of then show the whole board, and we'll see where we are. So yep, stay with me. Again, if you like what you see here, probably should have done this at the start, I'm no good at this whole businessy stuff, is give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit the little bell, do all those things that you need to do. Keep in touch with us. Of course, listen to the podcast, Tip of the Spearhead. It is a little bit more not safe for work, so bear with us on that one. That's how we are with it. But yeah, please keep in touch, and comment. Thanks very much. Right, so I did say we were going to coat it in polyfiller, and that's what I've done. So it's been a couple of days. Obviously, it's had to dry, and as you can see, I've started to patch some bits and pieces up. So I just thought I'd sort of take you through some of the perils and pitfalls of this kind of a project. Firstly, this fella now weighs quite a lot. It's a big bit of terrain. As you can remember, it started off life as that, and we've now gone to that. So what have we done? So we've put a coat of polyfiller on, and I've probably used, well, a very big box of it, to be quite honest. So if you can listen, it's dried nice and hard. It's hard but brittle is what I would say about it. And what it's mostly doing is it's mostly filling in the holes. So as I sort of come in for a bit of a close up, you can see we still have some holes. Some little holes are quite fine. Where the foam is underneath, but what we've mainly done is we filled in a lot of the big ones, and we've made it so that the next coat, which will be what I call hobby concrete, which is sand, PVA glue, more filler, mixed roughly equal, with some water, and it just becomes basically a sludge, and you paint the whole thing over it, and it will set, and that will set like rock. But what have we done here? So what you can see here, this is a DAS modelling putty. It's air dry, and that actually does set like rock. This is tough stuff. And what I've done is, because this is my fourth big table which I've done out of spray foam, and the thing with spray foam is it's an amazingly versatile substance. A lot of the cosplayers use it to make their sort of their weapons and armor and stuff as well. They do use foam, but I've seen them use spray foam, and you can control the spray foam with like a water mist. You can make the bubbles set very small and tight. When you want to go very big, like this fella again, you don't want that. You want bulk, you want size. And the problem is obviously it's very tough on the outside. You know, you could really struggle to put your finger through that. It's really tough. Because what happens is as it gets out to this section, this becomes much more tight, but underneath becomes much more open. So what you start to get is these big air pockets, and that's because the foam is doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to expand. So what you end up with, as you actually see here, if I carve a little hole in there, that's actually quite deep. There's a very big air pocket in there. And then what will happen is, as you're starting to carve away the harder exterior, you do get quite a few what I would call voids. Now, having worked with it before, you can just polyfiller that in, but it takes a lot of polyfiller. It takes a very long time to dry, and it's not. Just adds weight and doesn't really add an awful lot of strength, because whilst you can hear that's quite tough, if you had a sharp object, you'd pierce straight through it. So, you know, this is terrain for tournaments and for gaming. Models will move in, people will touch it, people will hear it, it happens. And if there's a void behind, it can break through. And whilst you then can fix it later, fixing something after you've painted it all is a pain because it's not going to be quite the same. So what you've got to try and do is when you get to the point where you've done all your polyfiller in, and what I did was I just put a couple of pair of gloves on, and I just very sensually massaged my big rock, make of that as you will, with polyfiller, and I used quite a lot, and then I got a spatula afterwards, and it's almost like basting a cake, to be honest. If you've never basted a cake, you won't know the joy and pleasure that that can bring, but it's pretty much what it's like. It's just like frosting a cake, and you just sort of smooth it all off, and you're trying to get sort of some angles, because you know, or after you've done a couple of these, you know what the next coat will do. The next coat will stick to a lot of this and will work. But again, so I know from previous experience, when I see a void, I want to try and fix it, and I want to try and strengthen it up for future use. So what I've done is I've just obviously patched it in, worked it around. You can see where it's drying, it's still a little bit deeper. And then as you spin it around, you can see here, this was a big problem. So this bit here has a very big void behind it. There's a very big air bubble, which I wasn't quite sure of when I was polyfilling it. I saw it, I tried to fill it in, but it just didn't look very safe. So what I did was I decided I would just absolutely just rebuild the corner. So I've rebuilt that hole. That's pretty much all modeling clay now. That is literally rock. And what I've done is I've effectively just rebuilt it all. So that whole section all the way down in here is now just mostly modeling putty. Modeling putty is a lot more expensive than polyfiller, so you don't want to be using a lot of it. But what it does do is where you know there's a problem, like on these couple of these tips weren't fantastic, so I've toughened them up. It will do exactly that. It will fill in the holes. It will make soft sections harder. And there's a bit there, you can sort of see the slightly discoloration. There was obviously a big hole, which is still in its process of drying. But there we go. So that's where we are. So the next coat, which will probably be in a couple of hours, if I'm honest, I might do that tonight, will be the next, and hopefully the finished version of before painting. And it will just look like a big, well, hopefully a big pile of sand by that point. But what that does is it gives you texture, and it really hardens. Well, you'll hear it when I it will sound very much like that, but all over, as opposed to a bit more of a dull funk. So it really hardens up your terrain and gives you something to paint over. Because what you want to do next is that when you paint it, you want some substance to dry brush, to texture, to really try and, you know, you don't want super smooth rocks, unless that's the look you're going for, because it doesn't look super realistic. You want a bit of life, a bit of roughness. All this stuff will come up really well when you're dry brushing it. But the next coat will cover all these little holes. Little holes I can deal with. I can cope with little ones. The next coat will sort all that out, and you won't even know about the modeling putty underneath. I'll know because I did it, but no one else will. And that's pretty much it. That's phase 2 of the Fang. Yesterday with it just covered in polyfiller and the Das modeling putty, and I've done what I call, as I said yesterday, this is my hobby concrete stage, which is sand, polyfiller, PVA, equal balance, bit of water to mix it all up, so that you can paint it on. And that's basically a big brush painting it on. And as I said, how's it gonna dry? It is like rock. This is a rock type substance now. It is tough as nails. And I'll bring you in for a little close up. What we've got now is, you see the sand has given it a little bit of texture, and it's kind of kept the texture from underneath. And so what you're sort of getting is, I don't really get that excited about it, but I really do, is you get loads of sort of like rock. Honestly, it now looks a bit more like rock, and we're getting lots of little bits, which when you dry brush the next sort of stage, it's going to really pick up a lot of this detail, and it's going to start to make it look a lot more natural than what is effectively well, foam covered in various different layers of filler. But this is my favourite stage of the build process, because you sort of spin it around, it now becomes very easy to manoeuvre. You can pick it up. It's very stable now. At this sort of stage, I'll pan back. You don't have any idea that this once was foam, and this is what I really love about it. It was clearly, I mean, I'll bring it back in again just so we can all remind ourselves. You know, it's gone from that to that, and it's not taken many stages. You know, we've done a carved stage. We've then done a polyfill stage, and then we've done the final stage. So to get from this to that hasn't taken us a lot of time. But now comes the exciting bit, which is the painting of the terrain. Now these are big old lumps. I put the Titan up against it on the first video. You know how big this thing is. So, you know, honestly, little pots of paint aren't going to cut it. So what you have to do is you have to go and get something a bit bigger. Now, we'll caveat this. This is not an endorsement of any company. This is just the company that we have. But I literally went and I bought a big tub of wall paint. I've picked a kind of a grey, which I think is a good start. Princeton. They all seem to be named after American universities for some reason. But there we go. So I've got a big tub of that, and that's going to paint all of my rocks. So I've got the same base colour on. And then what I've done is, because I'm not really sure about where I want to go next, I've got some tester pots. So I've got a tester pot of Delaware, which is a slightly lighter grey, for those interested. So what I'm going to effectively try and do is I'm going to cover the whole thing in the base grey. Then I'm going to mix up some wash. Now you can't use normal oil unless you're mad and you want to buy 50 pots of it. So what you have to do is you just basically get a jar, water, just some black, and then what you do is you then just effectively it's slightly black water. I can't really say it any different than that, and you just paint it on, and that will give you the sort of a wash type effect, which is it'll give you shadow, give you shade. And then when you dry brush on, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush. I'm probably going to give it another dry brush of the base paint just to bring it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of go from darker up to lighter. And I've got North Pole. There we go. North Pole is going to be, I'm going to effectively dry brush all the top. I'm going to try and make that look snowy peaked. I haven't yet decided if I want to use actual model snow yet. I might just go with the dry brush first, because whilst if I was doing it for an actual display, I probably would go the whole hog. These are just terrain boards. You can go as far or as short as you want to. Using the model snow, I would say is use model flock. Again, Games Workshop stuff is brilliant for little model bases. It's no good for stuff like this. You need to go bigger, and our good friends in the model railway world have that covered. So you can buy kind of industrial bags of it, or you can make your own. I think there's a recipe involving bicarbonate of soda or something. So it's not hard to do. If you really wanted to do it, you can do it. There's plenty of things out there to go a bit further. I haven't decided what colour for the base yet. All my terrain tables are themed, so terrain to mats. Haven't picked the mat I like yet. After a kind of a wintry tundra one, haven't really found one that really sort of jumps out at me. So I might end up going for a more snow one. Again, don't know. So I'm probably going to paint all this, and then I might just do that brown for now, just so I can finish it off. And brown's very easy to paint over or to put snow onto or anything like that. So I might just do that brown. So I go darker grey up to lighter grey, and then I'm going to dry brush all the tops with that North Pole, just to make it look like snowy peaks. Then got some foliage and stuff like that, which I might just place around. So you know, I always like to sort of, you know, I was trying to make out that mountains have life on them. So wherever there's a little ledge, maybe put a little plant, you know, little vestiges of life clinging on. And then yeah, maybe I was sort of thinking about doing sort of maybe a water thing in there, but I've kind of gone off that now. I've gone off that idea. So I'll probably just put a little bit of foliage down in the base, just to sort of liven it up a little bit. But that will be the next video. So the next video I will, where will I be in the next video? Yeah, so the next one I will maybe do one after I've done the base coat and the wash, just so you can see where that takes us to. And then yeah, onto the finish. So we're very, very close to having this done now. We have a big snowy peaked mountain. So I'll bring you in a little bit closer and try not to trip over the wires of my lights. But I actually think this has come out really, really well. Better than I thought, to be honest, because I've never done the snow bit. This was literally learning as I went. But if you think back to the first update video where I mean, I'll bring it in again just for the update where I went from that to this. I mean, you wouldn't believe it in a million years, would you? So it's amazing what a simple building substance like good old trusty spray foam can do. So we carved it all down into these shapes. It's now super hard. This is now a very hardy piece of terrain. And what I did was I painted it a very flat, a darker grey, and I built up layers of greys, dry brushing it on. You can't really tell, to be honest. It's only me. I can tell more than anything. You could just do one grey and the white over it and it probably look the same. But I think if you come in a bit closer, you can sort of see some of the the shading variants from, you know, probably a bit more there as well. So where it's added a bit of depth, that's merely for me, to be honest. The white was absolutely something I've never tried before. And this is my test piece, so I haven't practiced on anything else. This is it. So I've literally just done it on this, and all the bits where I sort of carved thinking that the snow would sort of settle has really worked well. I think it's come out exactly as I want. It's very noisy as I move it, but it's come out really well. I'm so chuffed with it. I've now got another 8 bits to do, but I'll rattle through them now that I've got the template of how I want to do it. I'll absolutely rattle through them in no time now. I'll get carving tomorrow and I'll probably have 7 or 8 pieces done over the weekend in terms of the start point, and then I'll just mix up a big bucket of polyfiller and I'll just go from there. But that's how I want to say easy, but it is. I think it is. I think anyone could do this. Obviously, practice will help. This is the 4th, as I said on the previous series, the 4th full table of terrain I've done out of this substance. You do start to learn how to use it, you start to learn how to work with it, and you start to learn the perils and pitfalls. Like the first one I ever did isn't nearly as good as this. You know, I might actually get it out and do a showcase on it if anyone's interested. It looks really cool, but I've made a lot of mistakes. I didn't use the hardening, so it's just polyfiller, so it's brittle, it breaks. I patch the thing up all the time, which is why I thought there's got to be an easier way than this, because this thing, if you even touch it, it falls to pieces. And then I've grown from there, and I've done a really cool lava board, which is all more black, sort of like sort of terrain, where I've then sort of built up over the top of that. So I've done quite a lot of various different versions of it, and I don't really want to just keep you looking at this, but it's coming really well. And what I really kind of like about the white was I just loaded a brush up and I started very heavy at the top, and then I worked sort of downwards to sort of try and do that sort of snowy peaks. And it really has worked. I mean, I was quite chuffed. This is the end I started on first. As I started to build up the white, I was getting more and more impressed, because it just worked. It picks up all of these little ridgy details. And actually, wasn't sure about the base, so I just as I was doing each layer of grey, I just did it on the base as well. But I'm really impressed with how the base has turned out too. Just very simple. I mean, I will change it to match whatever mat I end up buying. So I'll probably go more snowy. I'm looking at a snowy sort of mat at the moment, with these kind of big grey kind of like mountains just kind of rising out of the ground, with probably a lot more white. I think that'd look really cool. I want to get some, I've been looking for some sort of snow. Is snow the word? No, winter. Winter's probably better. Winter foliage. So I've just put a little bit of foliage into little cracks and crevices and onto the little bits of the floors, and just have a bit more life, because obviously plants do still grow up. You know, alpine plants still grow up in the mountains. They're very hardy. You know, some of them do die off and come back in the spring, we know that, but I just want to add a little bit, maybe a bit more something to it. But as it is, there you go. Imagine a big table. You've got another one, so there's going to be another big whopper like that next to it. So they're going to form kind of like the center points of the table. And the idea is, of course, and the reason why I did it this way, is an Imperial Knight can still see through the gaps, right? So I can still draw a line of sight with something tall, but when I'm down here, if I was to put a little dude, do I have a little dude? I do indeed. I have a little dude. Oh, look at this. I have a little, he's not on the right base, obviously, but I have a tiny little 2nd edition Commando. He's pretty cool. But, you know, he can hide in here. Nothing seeing him from the other side, which makes it really functional as a piece of terrain, but it looks really impressive, and you're going to have to think your way around it. Obviously, ignores line of sight weapons are just going to bomb him off the face of the planet, but if you haven't got those sort of weapons, you're going to have to think about what you're doing. You're going to have to come around, you're going to have to draw lines of sight to him. It makes for games that are more interesting, especially when it's objective based, and I play a lot of ITC, as anyone will know, so that sort of games where you're kind of moving around the table trying to do stuff. I find big bits of terrain make it more interesting. I'm sure the very competitives like it to be very fair. I don't necessarily think that works. I like a battlefield I have to think about, and this will certainly do that. So I will post a full picture of the table when it's done, right at the very end. But if anybody wants me to do anything different, as I said, I have tons of boards of terrain. If anyone will chat to me at an event or come to my own, I've got tons. I've made lots of different boards. I can share lots of different things. If you want me to actually do some more close-up how-tos. I can show you carving this stuff. I can show you basing. I can do anything you want. Like I said, I've got a type of crisp that rhymes with Dringles board, which I've done just to do out of, because I got a lot over Christmas. Friends and family put on a lot of weight because of me. Because I want to make a really cool kind of industrial, rusty industrial board. So that's all done and dusted and ready for me to paint, so I can start showcasing that. Whatever you guys want to see, leave it in the comments. I'm more than happy to provide. But there we go. Before and after. May more follow. And thanks very much for following. Thanks for any comments. And as always, and as I always forget, 4 times in a run, like, subscribe, leave comments, please do. Salty Si is what they know me as. I will happily answer to that. So if you want anything from me, you post it, I'll answer it. Thanks a lot, guys. Have fun.